think we're going to get started, and then as other people pop in, we'll let them in. But I want to get us started. I'm Dr. Robert Jason Grant, and I'm here with Carmen Jimenez Pride and Maria Davis Pierre. I'm going to introduce these two colleagues of mine really quick, and then we're going to jump into our topic, which is being Black and autistic, and some special things we want to talk about in that regard. So let me start with Maria Davis Pierre. She's a licensed mental health professional. She is also a trainer and speaker on many topics, including the one we're talking about tonight. She's got extensive experience working with children and families with autism, and she's the creator of Autism in Black. She has operates and has the Autism in Black podcast. And if you have not found that yet, I would encourage you to discover that. That's a great resource where you can dive much deeper into what we'll be talking about in this 1 hour. And I will put her website in the chat box here shortly once we get started. So you can find that podcast and her other resources. Carmen Jimenez Pride's a licensed clinical social worker, registered play therapist, and certified play therapy provider. She's also a trainer and a speaker and an author, and she has extensive experience working with kids with autism as well. And I will put her website in the chat box too here shortly. I am also a registered play therapist, an author, speaker, trainer, and creator of Alt Play Therapy, which is for kids with autism, children and families. And I'll put that link up as well. So we're so glad you guys are joining us. This is so much fun. I mean, it's neat to be able to give back and share some information and do this. Of course, our topic is far bigger than 1 hour on a webinar, but hopefully we can give you a few things that you can take and use. And if you have questions as we're talking, feel free to put them in the chat box. I don't know we'll get to every question, but I'm going to be monitoring that as Maria and Carmen are sharing and we'll try to get to those questions if we can. So I think we're just going to jump right in here so we can get going on this. So let's start with diagnosis challenges. We kind of have a little bit of an outline here. It's informal, but we're going to try to stick to it a little bit. Actually, before we do that, let me share some data. I think that's important for people to know real quick. And then Maria and Carmen are going to talk about diagnosis challenges for children who are Black, and we're trying to get these autism evaluations and diagnosis. So I think most of us, if we're familiar at all with autism, we know many of the special situations and needs and challenges that kids and teens face who have autism. And we probably know the stats in general. If not, I just want to point out, obviously, we have 1 in 59 getting diagnosed. That's a CDC stat. That's a high number. And we know the diagnosis is increasing all the time. So we're seeing more and more kids getting diagnosed with autism across the world. You know, that's a US stat, but honestly, the diagnosis is on the increase everywhere around the globe. But I want to share some kind of sad statistics, only because they kind of go along with some of what we're going to talk about today and why we're talking about this. Why talk about kids who are Black and autistic specifically, right? Because that's what we want to cover instead of just autism in general. Well, first of all, autism in general, the data is that someone who is autistic, there's a couple of different research studies that show that they're twice as likely to face mortality and twice as likely to be victimized as a neurotypical person. That's huge. And some of those things are certainly issues like wandering off, you know, and then finding the child not alive. But it's also issues like being victims of bullying, being sexually abused, being physically abused, dying because they've been secluded or restrained. Also, autistic individuals are more likely to encounter violence from a police officer, be on the bad side of that because of misunderstandings. So these stats on how individuals with autism in general are more likely to be victimized, abused, possibly even killed, more so than neurotypical individuals, is really scary. Now, that's your standard, typically, that research done on a white autistic person, usually a white autistic male. That's what a lot of research has been based on historically. So let's add some factors like this person is now Black and autistic, Black female and autistic, Black trans LGBTQ and autistic, and we just start piling on risk factors on top of that data I just shared. So it becomes a little scary, and we really need to make sure that we understand the unique situations and needs of our children who are Black and autistic. So now let's get back in there and start talking about some of these topics that are important to cover, like diagnosis challenges. So I'm going to turn this over to Maria and Carmen to kind of address this first issue.
Okay, so not only am I a clinician who does this professionally, but I'm also a parent to a child who is autistic. And I have a daughter who is 8. We got her diagnosed, her official diagnosis at 18 months. And it was a difficult process to get the diagnosis. There are so many barriers and stigmas that come into play when it is a Black parent um, trying to get the diagnosis for their child. I'm a clinician. My husband is actually a physician. And it took a lot of resources and a lot of advocating just to get a diagnosis for my child. So when we're talking about people who are not licensed clinicians, who are not healthcare providers, and don't have any knowledge about the resources that are out there, they are at a even more of a disadvantage, right? So we have healthcare professionals who don't even want to talk to Black mothers about autism because of the stigmas that they think of Black women. Too loud, obnoxious, they are not intelligent. They're doing this for a check. So these are things that parents have to first overcome to then have someone listen to them to get a diagnosis. We're also talking about lack of resources. There's so much misinformation that comes to the Black communities that we don't have the resources to know we go here to get this. We're also taught that when it comes to people who are professionals, we don't challenge them. So if in my instance, I went to my pediatrician first. She said, no, let's wait. In most instances, a Black parent would be like, okay, they're the professional, they know, so let's wait, but that again puts us at a disadvantage. We're talking about a 1.5 year gap between a Black child getting diagnosed and a white child getting diagnosed, and that's an overall average. Most of our children are getting diagnosed in elementary, in middle school, and we all know that as clinicians, that puts them again at a great disadvantage because early intervention matters. So, also misdiagnosis. Our children are constantly misdiagnosed with behavior issues. School loves to put them in that EBD category. So we know that they're not getting the right interventions for their diagnosis if they're misdiagnosed. So those are some of the challenges that we're talking about. And I know Carmen is going to talk about some more.
Right there when you said misdiagnosed, like at school, that's where I mostly come into play. Oh, your child needs to see a therapist. There's a behavior issue. So I'm getting the call. Oh, well, the school has said that my child needs to see a therapist. You're a play therapist. Can I come in? So I'm bringing the parent in first, and we're not even on the topic of autism. But as soon as they bring the kid in, I'm like, well, wait a minute. No. So I'm going in and talking to parents about, okay, this is a checklist. These are some of the criteria. This is what I'm seeing within 5 or 10 minutes. And the parents are like, what do you mean? So they, just like Maria said, there's a lack of information. And when the parents go back to their doctors, they don't get anywhere. Mm-hmm. So everything Maria said, I completely agree, because I see it on the back end when parents are bringing the kids into my office looking for services, and I can't offer them those initial services, or they want me to diagnose autism, and I can't do that just as a play therapist and as a licensed clinical social worker. So that need to have that education, that need to be able to communicate with their doctors and providers is definitely a big, big need.
Exactly. And when medical providers don't like to listen to us, because of the stigmas, it makes it even harder. Parents also don't know that there's a difference between getting the school categorization and then getting an actual medical diagnosis. So when they're in the schools getting this categorization, they then think that they can use it outside of school, and they can't. So then they have to start through the process. And when we're talking about statistics, we know that coming from a Black community, you're more than have a higher chance of being born into poverty and then staying into poverty. So then when we talk about resources and access to care and money, we're saying that, you know, I may not be in a position to pay for all of these things that my child needs to get a medical diagnosis. I had to pay over $5,000 to our pediatric neurologist for DNA testing that had nothing to do with autism, but just because he wanted to rule it out. These are the things that, you know, we're talking about. Out-of-pocket expenses are $10,000 for the medical side. Then we have the therapeutic side, and that's like $12,000. I don't know any parents who are walking around with that much money lying around, you know, a year when it comes to their kid. And then also in the school system, there's the independent evaluation. So if I'm disagreeing with what the school has said and the category that they've put my child in, yes, I have the option to get an independent evaluation, but a lot of schools like to say, you pay for it first, then we'll reimburse you. Who has $2,000, you know, to go and get this independent evaluation to then come back to the school and then still have a chance of them not, you know, taking into consideration what was said in the independent evaluation. You know, these are things that we have to constantly overcome because even in the school system, that Black parents are looked at in a certain way. Those evaluations that they're using to diagnose and categorize our children are biased towards Black students. Again, you know, they're made by, you know, white males who are looking at white males. So of course, when we're looking at behaviors or characteristics, a lot of that doesn't look like what they're looking for. So then they're like, oh, well, then it must be a behavior issue. Can't be autism. I mean, we're looking at the CDC just released data this year saying the prevalence is the same across races. Now, we all knew this, but it took until 2020 for them to say this. And hopefully they take the information and then say, okay, yes, Black children can be autistic.
That's so important. I'm gonna repeat you because you said something I think all the mental health professionals need to hear, which is historically, all of our instruments and inventories that we would use in diagnosis, evaluation processes, were normed on white males. Mm-hmm. And that's important to note, you know, because there could be a different look if you're not a white male. And then you're getting a inventory used to determine your diagnosis that's not really based on you and how you may be affected. And I haven't talked to you guys about this, but I just read this today. It was a research I just read today that said, Maria, you were talking about this, kids getting mislabeled, Black kids getting mislabeled as being, instead of autistic, oppositional, defiant, or lazy. That was one of them in the study, instead of autistic. That's
Yeah.
crazy.
It really is. I mean, there's even studies that when looking at just in the school system, how teachers perceive Black students, and it was done by the American Psychological Association. They were just looking at the facial expressions. So nobody was talking, just the facial expressions, and they would say, show us happy, show us sad. And by far, teachers saw Black students as angry with their emotions. So no matter what emotion they were expressing, they were seeing them as angry. So this is the teacher bias that we're also dealing with. So if we're saying a Black parent doesn't know anything about the medical side of the diagnosis, doesn't know anything about autism, and then their child is going to school, the school is saying, hey, we're noticing this, we need to do some evaluations, and then they're using these tools and instruments, and then they're placing the child in an EBD category or saying it's oppositional defiant or ADHD when it's not, then that puts us again at a disadvantage.
And it's starting in Head Start programs.
Mm-hmm.
I get a lot of kids that are in Head Start programs that they're angry, they're aggressive, they're oppositional defiant, and God forbid if they're a little bit larger.
Yes.
So that's even another added piece to it, and they don't see there's something really going on here. They're not comprehending, they're not understanding. They just see big, Black, and aggressive.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and it's a study out there that shows that Black boys are no longer cute after 2. So after 2, they're not cute. They are then labeled as aggressive by teachers.
And it leads into our next topic, what we discussed, and that is social skills. I mean, obviously, if you're a mental health professional working with kids with autism, you're going to get into social skill work, right? And so specifically social skill work in regard to our Black children with autism. Some thoughts on that?
I'll lead that. I'm just working directly in like the therapy room, play therapy room. I get a lot of families that don't have a lot of interactions outside of the home. So the skills are very limited. Being social, they're only socializing with mom and dad, grandparent, whatever the dynamics is in the home. So they don't have a lot of outside community. So when they go to school, that's the only community that they're getting. So kids are being excited, are not so excited, and they're showing different levels of engagement. So when I get them in the office and I'm asking those questions, tell me about how they respond in school. And if it's like on the negative side where they're not responsive, the teachers are saying they don't interact, oh, they're not listening, they're not paying attention, the teachers don't teach them anymore. So the parents are really concerned about that. So when I start interacting with them within the office setting, I'm noticing those things as well, but the teachers are not trying to do anything different to engage these kids. And then the parents don't understand what they need to be doing in the home. You just can't go home and put the TV on. You can't go home and just do your normal things. You got to do more because your child needs that more attention. So teaching those skills, I teach them in the playroom. I teach the parents how to do them within their home and then give them challenges within the community because it's needed. And in really good cases, I'm able to communicate with school counselors and teachers just to let them know I'm the professional, I'm helping the parent, I'm working with the kid, and this is what we need from the school.
Yeah. And with us being clinicians, we have to look at it from a cultural perspective as well. One of the top social skills that they like to talk about with children who are autistic is eye contact. That's one of the major things that they're like, the eye contact, but they're not looking at a cultural perspective from it. Some cultures, you are not allowed to look an adult in the eye. So these are questions that need answers to, right? So they need to be looking at it from that perspective. As clinicians, we take the one course in school and we all think we're culturally competent, and that is not the case. This is something we constantly have to learn because there's culture within culture. So when we're working with a client, we need to ask about the culture of the home because the very skills that they're saying they need to work on could be a cultural perspective behind why they're not doing it.
And that
Yeah,
would be one of my
oh,
biggest recommendations. I'm sorry. That would
no,
be
you
one of
go
my
ahead.
biggest recommendations to a clinician that's working with a family with an autistic child. Ask those questions. Find out the daily routines, how the family interacts within the home, the things that they do together, just so as a clinician you can know some of the dynamics and the culture within their own home.
Yeah, this is something that I know I brought up to you both before. This is embedded in my memory forever, probably. It was the first time this had happened to me. Obviously, I worked with a lot of kids with autism, and this was many years ago, and I was working with this little boy who was Black and autistic. He came from a biracial family. Mom was white, dad was Black, and we had done our intake and assessment. And so we were ready for treatment, you know. And so I was looking at, okay, these are the social skill deficits. I think these are the priorities. What do you think, Mom? And everything was great. And then she said to me, and we need to help him understand how he needs to manage things and what he needs to say and how he needs to act in certain situations in society being Black. And it like kind of hit me like a ton of bricks. Like, oh my gosh, you know, it was sort of like instantly a ton of bricks and then instantly like, yeah, that's right. That's a whole set of social skills that we're going to have to try to figure out if try to help him figure out what it means. I mean, it's complex enough for a neurotypical person, but I will always remember that. What do you guys think about that? Do you find that that's often the case in the kids you are working with?
I do. When working with Black parents, right? Because, you know, from a neurotypical standpoint, comprehension, you know, we teach differently to someone who is autistic. So even when they're trying to teach their child how to navigate this world as a Black individual, because that's what's, you know, they're going to see first. When they see my daughter, they're not going to say, oh, she's autistic. The first they're going to see is she's a Black little girl. You know, it's going to take deep conversation to even get to the point of, oh, she may be autistic, right? So they're just going to see a Black individual. So parents, you know, are often worried about, how do I teach my child to navigate this world as a Black individual? Because, you know, as me and Carmen know, we have to show up differently in society. You know, if I do something and get a little excited in my IEP meeting with my daughter, I'm seen as aggressive, while a white mom will be seen as passionate, right? So we know that we have to do things a little bit differently in society just to be protected. And even then, you know, sometimes it's not working. So the fear of, how, you know, do I protect my child so that they can navigate the world? And I think as clinicians, we then see it as, oh, you know, they're trying to make their child mask, or, you know, not show that they're autistic. And on the other side of that, especially for Black individuals, is I'm trying to protect my child as much as possible and not bring any added attention to us.
Yeah.
And Maria, I cannot agree with you more. Because I've been that last school year, I was that parent in the IEP meeting, and I was looked at aggressive. And it just totally, all of the letters behind my name, the education, and I went in with education. They was not expecting me to be able to come in and talk to them and understand what's going on. And if I was in that situation, I can only imagine what it's going to be like for parents that don't have the knowledge, don't have the verbiage to come in and advocate for themselves. I find myself doing a lot of work with the parents, and to basically giving them skills on how to navigate in these settings, how to walk in the world, and how to walk in the world with a child that's not like other children, how to advocate for them, how to stand up for them. And they half the time they come in angry. And they're starting off with confused and transition to anger because they don't know how to handle these things, and they don't have a lot of language for it. So definitely developing language for the parent so they can navigate and they can show their kids is one big thing that I do on my end.
Exactly. And knowing that usually by the time the parent has gotten to you, they've seen so many other people. So there's been a lot of people who have let them down, who have disappointed them. So, you know, when they're coming in and they're frustrated, it's not that they're aggressive and angry and just, you know, mad with the world and, you know, mad with the diagnosis. They're frustrated at the fact that they've had a long line of people disappoint them, disappoint their child, and now they're here we go, starting it again. And how do I trust that you're going to do what you say you're going to do?
I
That's
just
what
think that
that container. You got to build that container for your families. You got to give them that opportunity to talk, express themselves, and be okay with their voices raising, their body language looking aggressive. Because you can see, just like you said, it's not even about that. It's a level of frustration. And they just need to be heard. And they need to be heard in a calm and creative space for them.
it just sounds like such good information for us as therapists when we're working with our kids and our parents who are Black to understand this, especially if we're not Black, that they are possibly going to run into these scenarios and these situations, and to have that awareness, to have that empathy, to have that understanding. So maybe we can help, you know, maybe we can give a heads up like, hey, you know, when you go in there, or at least when we hear it, we are empathizing instead of questioning it, right? Um, and I love this idea. I mean, ever since that client, I mean, if I work with any child who is a person of color, I always remember in my head and think, okay, are we adding in here to the social skill work that we have to work on how you navigate socially being who you are? Instead of just, you know, the typical stuff that we would work on with any child who's autism, now we have another category of social skill work that's really important. And, you know, that's really important. I know you guys wouldn't say this because you're nice, but that's really important for us who are white, because if we're working with a child who is Black, we need to understand, like I did, like that wasn't on my radar till that mom said that to me. And we need to understand that that's going to be true for us. And so we have to take a little bit of extra time to think about it and try to be more aware and try to hear folks who are telling us these things, you know, like you guys are. I just think that's really important that we mention that in here and what you guys shared about that. And you led into our next, oh, Carmen, did you want to add to that?
I said, I agree.
Okay. You led us right in perfectly to the next thing, which is working with parents. So I know you both work with parents of kids who are all autistic, and you work with Black parents, you work with white parents. And so what is that? I'm curious about what you see as maybe the differences in your work when you work with children and parents who are white or children and parents who are Black who are dealing with autism.
Well, for me,
So
oh, go ahead.
for me, you know, with the name of the company being Autism and Black, so 99% of my clientele is Black parents and Black children. I do have the occasional white parent and white child, or white parent with a Black child. And the major differences are basically what you have stated, is that the concerns are completely different. I see especially with a white parent raising a Black child, they don't take into consideration of how their Black child has to navigate the world. You know, and when Black parents come in, that's the main thing they're talking about. How do I protect my child when, you know, in this world we're in? You know, so those are two of the main differences. That the concerns and the worries are quite different, because Black parents are coming in with issues and concerns that relate back to being Black. You know, I have to go into a space of an IEP meeting and I'm the only Black parent or the only Black person, and everybody is there as professionals, and I'm not a professional. So empowering Black parents to know that you are the expert in your child, so you are an expert at the table. So giving them that voice to know that they are advocating not only for their children but for themselves as well. That's not something I typically see when working with white parents.
And in what I do, when I get a lot of white families that come in, they have resources.
Yes.
They're telling me stuff. I'm like, oh, let me write that down. So I can take that to other parents. And when my Black parents come in, sometimes I'm the first stop. Or they've been told, oh, I think your child has autism. And then they go to their doctor and their doctor's like, no. And then they're told that, oh, you need to get this several $1,000 evaluation, and they're frustrated. So I'm doing a lot of, just like Maria said, helping these parents advocate for themselves, showing up with them, giving them Maria's contact information. That's one of my go-to things. When there's questions like IEPs, and I'm not like well versed in that, and I know that she is. So I have to make sure that I have good resources and things already in place so I can give them and help prepare them. But to me, it's a big difference. My white clients are coming in and they're ready. My Black clients are coming in and I'm having to explain a lot. I'm having to spend a lot of time with them, referring them to therapists, giving them resources just for themselves. And then, just like Maria said, how to navigate the world as a Black family with a child with autism.
Exactly. And you hit a great point about the resources. As I was saying, we don't get those resources in our community. As a therapist who got the diagnosis for their child, I was just handed the paperwork and was like, go on about your business and good luck. There was no sit down and this is how you do things and this is what you do. You type in autism in Google, you get so many hits, it's overwhelming, right? So, when we're thinking about now adding in the Black factor into that and knowing that, okay, I got to teach my child how to prepare for another thing, that is extremely overwhelming for a parent, so they don't know quite where to turn to. And when we're looking at resources, we're not seeing people that look like us. When people are coming into our homes, they're not understanding the culture behind why we do things, so we're often misunderstood. There's a long history of, experimentation when it comes to the medical side and the Black community. Also, as therapists, you say the term social worker in the Black community, what is the first thing they're going to think? You're here to take my kid, right? So we have to, especially if you're a white social worker, so you have to prove yourself 10 times over when working with the parent, because they're just not going to come in and be like, I'm listening and ready to everything you're saying. It's more of a building that rapport and proving that you're not going to take that information and then use it against me. And my child is now in the system because of something that you misinterpreted.
And as a Black clinician, I'm having to work real hard to build that trust. Because Maria referenced before, by the time they get to us as clinicians, they've then seen so many people. So we're having to rebuild trust in that setting.
There's a question I want to ask you guys. Someone asked, is there informational resources like videos of early signs of autism that are culturally sensitive to Black lived experiences? Any that you know of that you'd recommend to families?
There are none. None that I know of.
None that I know of.
I'm like, I don't know any. And if Maria says she doesn't know any, there is none.
I mean, when we're looking historically as far as research and anything with being Black and autistic, we are not in those resources at all. I mean, we're just now getting into the research. So I haven't seen any videos that would show that side. That's a good idea. And, you know, that's something
Yeah.
Autism Black might create.
Please
That
do.
is a really good idea, Maria. I mean, I can see how that would be really helpful. Another question, we kind of talked about this, but if you've got anything else to add, how can those in private practice, you know, us therapists, be best help in the process of supporting children and parents in advocating, in advocacy work?
I would say learning research, learning resources.
Mhm.
So when there's opportunities, even if you don't need it, like I attended, it was a webinar about IEPs. That's definitely not in my area, but let me listen to this information because I know it can help a family. And since I'm in the private practice, I don't have all the resources. It's like big agencies. So all the little opportunities that I can get, I'm going to take advantage of so I can have that information in my back pocket and be able to help a family if they have a question that comes up.
Exactly. And also looking at the family from a systemic perspective. When we're looking at it from just one lens, we'll have a preconceived notion of why something is happening. We need to gather information from the other people in the home and look at it from that culturally responsive systemic lens, because just because we're thinking, oh, the parent is resistant, you know, it might be that there are 3 generations living in my household telling me how to raise my child. And as Black people, we have to respect our elders. So I'm not going to go against grandma who's been there, done that, as she'll tell me, you know. So I have to give a certain amount of respect. I'm also not going to go against my religion that has said, you know, we take it to God, we pray about it, you know. So there might be an actual internal struggle that is going on with this parent, rather than them being viewed as resistant to having their child be in therapy and get interventions.
Great, thank you. There was a question about code switching. Are you finding that you're having to teach about code switching to support staff as you're advocating on behalf of the child or family? Do you want to elaborate on that, Brian, at all? Or do you guys want to speak to that? I want to make sure I know exactly what you're asking.
I don't particularly teach about code switching to support staff. Are you talking about to white support staff who don't understand what code switching is? If that's the case, then yes, I let them know that, you know, this is what code switching is, and this is why we have to, in certain situations, code switch. But as far as my Black clients, I want them to be as authentic as possible. Even something I'm working on myself, being authentic with who I am and not code switch so much for white people to be comfortable, basically. But I will let white staff, therapists know what code switching is and why this parent may be presenting a certain way when you see them in this situation.
And I have those conversations when I'm communicating with schools. Counselors are calling me from the school, or teachers, or just other professionals. I'm talking about that same thing as well. Just because they're sitting in there and they're shaking their heads, if they're not asking questions, you need to explain some more because they don't get it. And that's the code switching piece. And I'm also telling parents, you cannot do that. You can't do that. And I think parents are, and I don't know if you feel the same way, Maria, before they're coming in for our services, they're checking us out to see who we are and how we show up in our professional worlds. And they're trying to see how we're showing up in our personal worlds. So if we're being authentic, we're going to gain that trust from the parents before they even hit the door. Yeah. And that's important to continue doing that. And I think that's going to be important for any clinician, regardless of the color of your skin. If you don't know something, say it.
I agree. And most of my clients know everything about me, my child, my husband, my twins before they even, you know, have the first session. But that is also why I am so authentic about my story, not my daughter's, because I do respect her privacy, but my perspective as a parent who's raising a child who is autistic, especially being a professional and being Black. You know, the more that I stand on my platform and say, I'm not ashamed. This is what I'm going through, and you don't have to be ashamed of, of your situation as well. That helps bridge that gap as well with my clients.
Someone just kind of got into that a little bit. They're asking about masking and can you talk about the balance between the trauma that masking causes autistics and masking as self-protection being Black in American society?
Mm-hmm. So there is a difference. It's not particularly called masking what Black people do to navigate the world. It's code switching or protection. So it's not masking because we can't mask that we're Black. People are going to see that they'll be 10 feet away, they're going to see that I'm Black, right? So with masking, that is not something that I'm going to tell parents to do for their child who is autistic. When it comes to the stimming, when it comes to certain things like that, what, a lot of people are saying, they want autistics to do, that's not something that I'm comfortable with saying. That's not my platform. But on the other hand of it, there's a protection that Black parents have to do with their children. So I know that if my child goes into Publix and they have a autism meltdown, sensory overload, things like that, they are automatically going to be looked at differently from a white child who is doing that, right? I also know that if my child is headbanging or doing anything else, that could be a characteristic of someone who is autistic, my child, again, is going to be looked at differently from a white child, right? So there are certain things that we want to do to protect them. And a lot of that does deal with the behavior side of therapy, but it's not a masking of you can't be autistic, it's replacement behavior, because we know that if I'm not with you, and even if I'm with you and somebody perceives what you're doing wrong, you are at a great risk to not come home that day. So it's more about protection rather than masking.
I couldn't agree with that more. Definitely protection.
What about some tips in coaching Black parents regarding anger and IEP meetings?
I don't know if I might be the right person because I'm angry. Okay, no. It's about what I tell parents. One is that they really should have an advocate, right? This is work that I do professionally. I have an advocate when I go to my children's IEP meetings because as a parent, I want to stay in my feelings, right? I'm not going to be able to switch into professional mode. Anything that they've said about my child is triggering me. So, it's good to have a advocate in there that's going to be, kind of leading the way and making sure your child is getting what they need. Because it's hard as a parent to separate the two, right? And then fuel that anger into passion. I sit in my feelings. I acknowledge my feelings. If I hadn't followed my feelings, my child would not have been diagnosed at the age she was diagnosed, right? So you have to use those feelings and acknowledge them in a way that is going to help your child. IEP meetings are a place where you get angry. They are the schools are not telling you information. You go in there, again, there's 10 people sitting on one side. They've had a meeting before you got there. They decided what they're going to do before you get there with regarding your child. They've made all the decisions and they're just having you there as a formality to sign the paperwork. So it is a very frustrating situation, especially when you're just trying to get your child on an equal playing field as somebody who is neurotypical, doesn't have a categorization, is in general education setting, right? So I have to fight 10 times harder just to get 10 extra minutes of speech for my child that needs it. And you want to go back and forth with me because it's not a fun that you want to spend something on, so it is a frustrating environment. So it does get heated, and, the feelings are valid. So I'm not one to tell a parent not to be angry because it's a situation that makes you angry.
And I'm going to have a completely transparent moment right now. Last school year was the first time I ever had to deal with an IEP as a parent. So before that, I would tell parents, well, just be calm, don't get upset. And I'm coaching them to silence themselves. And when I had that IEP experience and I had to call on Maria for that, I stopped doing that. You have to show your emotion, because if you don't, as a Black parent, they're going to either put on the paper or put in their minds that you don't care.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that was a dynamic learning experience for me. Like, if I don't ask these questions, I don't care, or I'm not knowledgeable. And if I'm experiencing that, I know my parents are too. So I'm doing the same thing Maria's doing, go in with an advocate. I might not be the best advocate, because I will get just as upset as you in that meeting. Get someone that can calm themselves and be there and hold space for you. And let your emotions go, because if you don't, you'll just be sitting there and they're going to say you don't care. And that's what I'm starting to tell parents now, and going through like letting them ask me the questions to practice. That's something else I help with my parents with. Okay, let's practice this. And they're like, well, you're the therapist. Well, this is important, because what you do is going to help your child. And it's going to have you keep coming to me and have you understanding what's going on in the playroom or in the therapy room. So yeah, let's practice. Ask these questions. And if there's things that I don't know as the clinician, I'm calling Maria.
and understand, like Carmen was saying, regardless of how we go in there, the stigma is still going to be there. So if I go in there and I'm not talking, I'm seen as the person who doesn't care. If I go in there and I'm passionate, I'm seen as aggressive. So either way, it's not a winning battle. So, let your emotions drive you to make sure your child is getting what they are supposed to have, because that's what an IEP meeting is. We're fighting for things that they should have, not anything great and spectacular and out of the ordinary. We're talking about just giving my child the skills and the services that they need to be on equal footing as someone who doesn't have a diagnosis.
Maria, I like what you said. You started off talking about, being this parent who walks into the table and there's 7 professionals around you, and they've got all these degrees or whatever, and you don't have any, and you're at the table, and just that intimidating feeling. And again, repeating what Carmen said, no matter what you're still the expert on your child, and you're the expert at the table on your child. But you guys mentioned this for just a resource for people who are listening. If you're in a place where you can go to the IEP meeting with the parent, or if you know somebody in the community who does that as a service, that could be really huge. I've sat in on an IEP meeting and didn't say much. And then afterwards, the parent has said, that's the best, most productive one we've ever had. And it's just because somebody else was there on the parent's side. They straightened themselves up a bit and got more productive. And so if you're listening and you're a clinician and you're in the position to do that, just showing up, you don't even have to be the expert in special ed law. Just showing up as support, I think, would be huge.
It definitely is. As someone who does this for a living and was telling the school exactly the same thing my advocate was telling them, when I had my advocate come in and she was telling them the exact same thing, they were like, okay, that's fine. I'm like, I said that as well. I'm a professional as well, but they weren't listening to me. They only see me as a parent. But when the advocate came in, they were like, okay, they were ready to go. And it was the most productive meeting that we had. It was a 4-hour meeting, but it was a productive meeting.
And I
go ahead, Carmen.
Just as a therapist with a client. And again, I'm not speaking on all the laws. I'm just asking questions. So they're saying abbreviations. Excuse me, what does that mean? Mm-hmm. And me doing that showed the parent, this is how you operate in this meeting. Mm-hmm. I don't have to know all the things, but if it's not sounding right, could you repeat that? Could you explain that more? And after I did that, that gave my parent more courage to open up and be able to ask those questions as well. So just being able to demonstrate that in that type of setting is very empowering to your client.
And I like to say, as clinicians, if you have a child who is autistic, more than likely they have an IEP, and you should be giving your input for that parent to in that meeting. So if you can't come to the meeting, then write a letter of support, because it's very helpful to the parent when you're working with a child on certain things outside and you see how it's working. They can then use that to with their in school services. So if you cannot attend the meeting, write a letter, because you're seeing that child and that child with certain goals and things. So please make sure that you are participating in any form in these meetings, because it's helpful to the parent and the child.
Most of the other questions kind of fall under the heading of the white clinician bias, which I know you all wanted to talk about. Most of the questions were, are there culturally appropriate resources I can use? Is there culturally sensitive resources on putting together my treatment plan, things like this I can access, and anything to avoid, and I'm assuming they're talking about if you're not Black and you're working with Black children who are autistic. So can you kind of talk about that, and also just sort of that white clinician bias issue?
Sure. Well, I would definitely first ask, what is the culture of the home when working with the family? I think that is the most important thing. When I saw that on my child's therapist paperwork, I was like, oh, okay, this is going to be a different experience. They actually want to know, how, if we have any cultural traditions, how the culture of our home works, anything that they should be aware of when it comes to our culture. And that put me in a different frame of mind when meeting the therapist, because I was like, okay, they actually care to know how my culture can impact the treatment, right? So I think it comes from a place of wanting to know, having open conversations, and not avoiding it. I cannot avoid that I'm Black, right? So you can't avoid having this conversation with me because it makes you uncomfortable, or you feel that, I don't see color and it doesn't really impact the treatment room. It does. There are certain things that, we may do as clinicians that are not going to make sense to the Black community. One of the examples I like to give is when we're talking about solution-focused therapy and they throw that miracle question out there. Oh, if you could wake up tomorrow and this be gone, Black people are going to be like, yeah, so no, that's not how it works, right? So, you could be seen as, I don't know what kind of funny business you're coming in here and talking about, because there's no miracle that's happening tomorrow. So we have to take these things into consideration. And it's not that they're resistant to the therapy. It's just that that particular intervention is not going to work for their culture. So you have to figure out, what is going to be the most effective. And it's going to take a trial and error, but be honest with the family of, I'm trying to figure out what is going to be most helpful. And if it doesn't work, then don't see it as something wrong with the client or the family, but maybe it could be how you're approaching the situation.
I would say definitely finding out what the family is currently doing, and how they're operating and the support systems that they have in place. So that's one big thing. And second, this might be bigger than that one. Don't lead with, I don't see color. Oh, it doesn't matter about the color of your skin, because when you're saying you don't see color, you're not going to see your clients. And that is a complete turnoff to your clients. Because if you can't see the way that they're coming into your room, how are you going to really work with them? How are you going to relate with them? How can they trust you with their stories? How can they trust you being alone with their children? So that's a major one.
And do the work as a white clinician. You have to confront your own implicit biases. You do. You have to confront these things if you want to work with those who are people of color, who are Black, who are Indigenous. You need to do the work. It's very important. And yes, it's hard, right? You're confronting things that, you've learned all your life that to be true. So it is hard work, but it will be so valuable to the families that you work with.
I agree with that.
Yeah, that's so good and so helpful. And so I'm going to give a shout out to Maria's resources because on her website, and I will make sure I put those in the chat right now, actually, because I forgot, you could just start going through her podcast. I've listened to several of her podcasts, and there's just so much good information there that I've learned. That's a good resource for a clinician to learn more about being culturally sensitive, understanding what might be going on with the Black child that is in front of you that you're trying to provide treatment for. That's a great resource. And I know both Carmen and Maria do trainings regularly on these topics. So again, you could access their resource, and they're not the only two people. I mean, there are actually quite a lot of trainings out there where you could learn more about resources, possibly even some related to culturally sensitive treatment planning, culturally sensitive playroom, all kinds of topics you might be interested in that I can't necessarily point you to a specific source, but I know there are people out there like Carmen and Maria who are offering these trainings periodically. So that would be a great place to access information that might answer some of those questions. Any other thoughts on that, Maria and Carmen, while I put your websites in the chat?
I actually do offer a culturally responsive training that is on the intersection of race and disability. A lot of culturally responsive trainings do not add that component in, but I, of course, think it's important, one, being autism and Black, but also being an advocate for the Black disability community. You have to navigate that world completely differently.
And I do a lot of consultations with clinicians, a lot of white clinicians, with how they can work better with their African American families. So that's always an option, just to make sure you're doing it right, make sure your paperwork is looking right. And to me, there's nothing wrong with going in and wanting that additional information, because I do it. When I meet with a family that I'm not connected to and I don't know much about, I'm seeking that information, if not directly from the family, but definitely from other clinicians that can relate to that family. So just doing your work is going to be key.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions? Because we're at the end of our hour. And actually, so, okay, there are no more questions because we're at the end of our hour. But I know that you could follow up with either of these ladies and kind of check out their resources and maybe get some additional information or answers to some questions you would have from them. Okay. So let's thank Carmen and Maria. You guys are awesome. Thanks for doing this and taking your time and sharing your expertise. That's so helpful. Maybe we'll do something again in the future. And thank you guys for joining us. We really appreciate seeing people interested in this topic and wanting to learn more. That really, I know, makes me happy, and Carmen and Maria, to see that. So we did record it. If all goes okay, we'll get it out. Each of us will be distributing it so you can share it with colleagues. So we're going to sign off. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.